Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is an airport scenery review of Innsbruck Airport, LOWI, sandwiched between Germany and Italy in the Alps in Austria. Austria seems to be getting the full MSFS treatment from the scenery developers these days, and this package is available in the marketplace and costs around 19 US dollars, which is about 16.5 euro or 26 Canadian dollars. The download size of this package is pretty large at 3 gigabytes, and when installed on disk, that becomes 3.5 gigabytes. ORBX tells us, and to summarize, Innsbruck is one of the iconic airports of the world with a jaw-dropping background. I agree. A true multi-purpose field that has been meticulously crafted with over 160 custom landmarks, including the Europa Bridge. There are dozens of listed features, but of most importance to us, stunning PBR texturing, complete airport and cityscape ultra-detailed PBR textures in 4K, hand-colored custom ortho, ultra-detailed ground poly, painstaking attention to detail, and by an acclaimed developer, Jared Marshall. Believe it or not, that is the very short version. This is the location of this scenery package on the globe, and this is its corresponding 10.9 or airport diagram. I can confirm that the taxiway signs are correct. The PAPI lights on runway 8 have the wrong glide slope and are not working. Displace threshold on runway 8 is correct. I commend the developer for the proper runway edge lighting that is yellow for the last 2,000 feet, and the centerline lighting is also correct. This is actually the first package, both either in the default scenery or in upgraded scenery, that I've seen correct runway edge lighting. The approach lighting system on runway 26 doesn't exactingly match the Jeppesen charts, though it is very close and close enough that I would consider it accurate for the sake of simulation. All three windsocks are in their correct positions, so they've obviously put those correctly, but they've also left the two probably default windsocks, so there's actually two more windsocks than there needs to be. This is the before and after view in the world map view. Notice the fluorescent green grass. This is the default airport, and this is the upgraded view here. Anytime you're looking at the before and after shots, you can tell if it's the scenery before because of the fluorescent green grass, and this is actually an interesting airport to review. This is because this is one of the handcrafted airports provided in the standard edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this, unlike a lot of the airport reviews I've done, does not have a bad airport to start with. Clearly, when you do the before and after shots on the terminal areas of the other scenery packages, it's night and day, and the existing airports look horrible. This airport, by default, does not look horrible. It's not necessarily accurate, and definitely, I'll be up front right now and say it's nowhere near as good as this scenery package upgrade. This is a nice upgrade, but the default scenery is nice. And if you haven't already noticed, see if you can find any of that fluorescent green grass in this shot here. You can't. So this should give you an idea of the scope and size of this scenery package upgrade. It's big. As we take a look at the terminal section of the new package and bring it down into a slice here so we can scroll over the default scenery, which again is handcrafted from Microsoft, it really gives you an idea of how the developer can take what is a good set of models and is a nice airport with all the new features in Microsoft Flight Sim, parallax textures in the windows and things like that, and really bring it to the next level. When we start to get into the sort of detailed work of these terminal buildings and areas, you'll really see how they've upped their game. And the airport area of this upgraded scenery is very highly detailed models, great textures, and the color grading is excellent. It's just, all in all, this airport looks very realistic, and you wouldn't have really noticed it until you see the before and after, because it looked good before. But then when I upgraded and started looking at it, I realized just how much better it looks. Other developers take notice. The textures in around where you're taxiing, and especially the grass areas and the edge of where these textures meet, this is how it's done. It looks great. The all the surfaces that you're going to see when you're close to the ground and in your aircraft in this airport look amazing. And it's really one of the areas that disappoints me most when I'm taxiing in a scenery package that I've upgraded to and paid for, and the ground textures look absolutely horrible. And we'll traverse from one side of the terminal buildings to the other here and take a look back and forth from the default scenery to this upgrade. And everything you see here, all the models included in this upgraded scenery, are absolutely great. They are as good as any other package. And this is the default control tower with the parallax textures in the windows there that Microsoft is showing off. And this is the upgraded control tower area that we'll flip to. And about my only complaint here, I'd like to have seen more transparencies in the control tower specifically, because it's kind of a focal point. And don't worry, we'll get to those ground textures you might notice here in a second. I think this shot here as I pull out really gives you a good indication of the difference between the handcrafted models, which look great until you switch. And then they start to they don't quite look as realistic in my opinion. This really has a lot of depth and a photograph feel to it. And after having seen that and looking back at the default scenery looks a little bit more like a little bit more of a cartoon or a SketchUp model, and just loses that realism feel. And again, you really need to see them beside each other to get that full effect. The models and like I've said, the color grading here are excellent. And as we sweep over this terminal building once again to go over to the parking lot side of this structure here, we run into sort of my biggest gripe with this and a lot of the scenery packages. Look at the upgrade on the right. Look at the parking lot textures. I've said this in previous reviews. Forget the photorealistic satellite image views that you're trying to overlay on the parking lot textures, and just do what Microsoft did. Pick a nice high-res parking lot texture and overlay it with the parking lot lines and put your cars on top of those. Because what is an awesome model is just ruined by this. Well, you can see it on the right. It just looks horrible. And is this going to ruin your experience with this scenery package? Probably not, because unless something really went wrong, your aircraft should never end up on this side of the terminal building. But when you're doing a package on this size and scale, and they really have done such a good job at it, why not use a technique like Microsoft did on the left with your own textures and just build out your own parking lot structures? Portland was another one that really griped me about this. But anyways, this is probably one of my largest gripes with this package, just because the package is so good. It has sort of this one scar to it. But back to the good stuff. Let's take a look at some of the standard, well, I wouldn't call them standard models in, around, and surrounding the terminal buildings. These are all the other little models that a lot of the developers sort of missed the boat on, if you could say, sort of the standard hangars and things. They'll pay a lot of attention to the terminal buildings, but then when it gets to the hangars, they become a little bit more generic. Not so in this case, even when it comes down to the different logos that are probably on the real buildings themselves. So I commend the developer here. These, the whole terminal area and all the hangars and all the different assets that are in around this airport are all really well modeled, have very nice textures, and all look the part. Now, I want to mention before we move on to the next section of this review, which is the night lighting, and then quite a large section on the surrounding areas of this package, that I had a lot of footage of all the different models and surrounding areas, and this review would have been 45 minutes long if I included it. So I had to delete a ton of footage. But I just wanted to let you know that there is so much to this model. It's giant. We'll take a look at the scope in a bit, but know that I couldn't possibly cover everything. And for anyone wondering, I've seen the question asked in the forums if Microsoft handcrafting all these airports takes away from what scenery developers can do. I think that a picture speaks 1,000 words in this case. There's clearly plenty of room for developers to offer something, and this airport is a great example of that. I think you'd have to agree that the night lighting in this package looks stunning, and again, we're not looking at just some default auto-gen scenery here. This is a handcrafted airport by Microsoft that, prior to seeing the scenery package, I would have said was a very well modeled, handcrafted piece. And that brings us to the really second part of this review. It's almost a review unto itself, which is the surrounding areas of this airport, which are very large in scale. And, you know, according to them, they've handcrafted 160 custom buildings and landmarks in the area, and I couldn't possibly cover them all. The more I looked, the more I kept finding, but at some point just had to pull the plug, as I had been removing and adding the scenery package about a half dozen times before I finally called it quits. And it's not just the addition of all the surrounding structures and buildings that is so impressive, but it's the trees and the roads and the bridges and the color grading especially, and just the feel of the whole area. And this is where it starts, way out here. We're not even near the airport, and this is the default scenery. Look at the color of the river and the grass in the area, and we flip back to the scenery and so many buildings along the river here and the apartment buildings. And we'll just switch to the edge of where I can find the scenery starting here and crossing this river, and you can see the airport runway straight ahead on approach. All of this has been handcrafted in one form or another. Even the default scenery that is here, it looks like it's been color graded and all the different landmarks added, and the river just looks so much better, and the tree lines. At very top left on that ridge, you can see fluorescent grass, and way past you can start to see now on the other side at the top screen where it's fluorescent grass again. But everything else that you've just seen sort of pass through your screen, there's so much of it that's been edited, or buildings or structures or landmarks that have been added. The before and after of the Europa Bridge here on the Autobahn is also included. And notice the bottom of the screen. This is the before shot on approach from the other direction, runway 08, and all those buildings, those factories, that was a bit quick. I should have reshot that, but all the buildings on the left there, all been modeled. And with that, guys, I will mention there is a problem with at nighttime in this area. Actually, it's not just this airport scenery, but the other Austrian airport in this area. And it's something to do with the street lamps that are all up in the sky. Now, this has nothing to do with the scenery package. I actually unloaded the package and loaded the default package to ensure that it wasn't the scenery package doing this, and it isn't. But it is worth mentioning that there is an issue in this area that makes it look like all the street lamps are up in the sky. So you can take a look at your package with the default scenery and see what that looks like, and see if that bothers you at night enough to not warrant upgrading a package in this area. But either way, I'll wrap this up and say that this is a pretty incredible little scenery package, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this to anyone interested in flying in such a beautiful area in Austria. And with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next video.